Well, welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. I've got Joe Wilkinson here, and he is doing artisan growth strategies, and he has been vibe coding a lot of stuff, as have I, and I'm sure we're going to get into that and many other details because he also lived in China and has a very interesting perspective on China. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and just get into all sorts of stuff. It'll be fun.
Yep. So China... And you speak it. Are you still connected to the internet in China? Like, can you access it with your level of Chinese, basically?
Yes. It depends on which path. And one of the things I think we chatted about before is I built this like processing system that I was vibe coding, and so part of that is so there's both like, hey, I'll go navigate it, get on Rednote or get on Douyin or whatever, and go explore that and Weibo. But, there's just, even in English, like too much stuff coming out. And so I have like this ingester that has, it was mainly English and Chinese, but I've started adding like other countries where I'm like, hey, it'd be interesting to see what they're saying in Thailand and Russia or whatever. And it pulls podcasts, it pulls news sources. You can pull anything that I kind of set up, right? So I have like 10Ks in the US. And so that's the other way I like stay on top of Chinese, what's going on in China, I guess, if you will.
But it translates it, right? You don't need Chinese to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I'll say, hey, flip it over. It'll pull out like excerpts it depends on which AI is actually running it. So I use OpenRouter so I can switch it over. Cool. And sometimes it translates the excerpts and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, it translates it all over in English.
And so were you a coder beforehand, or is this a new superpower you've gained just like me?
Yeah, just like you. Like, I think, we both worked in tech. So I've worked in tech for a long time and very closely with engineers. So like wrapping my head around the modular pieces and being able to talk about that. But the actual language of like how to get a program to do what you want, just start and stopped multiple times and then totally unlocked with the vibe coding.
It's crazy how that works, right? Because it's just this thing where it's like, like you, like me, like a lot of other people, basically we're just kind of hit with this brick wall of like, what does this code do? What was the biggest issue for you beforehand, before 2022?
I think there were two. One was just the time it took to put into it. And then, well, like the way to learn coding was really frustrating for me. And I don't know what that says, but right, you'd be like, hey, here's a way, go learn this thing. And most of the places, I actually found a place right when vibe coding was coming out called Exercism that has an intro course that explained it better than I've ever seen it before. But otherwise, you look at Coursera, you look at all the other places, it's called Exercism, but like exercise, not, like at the gym.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's great. Like, it was originally built for, I think, like hardcore coders to learn other languages. They have a full language track. And so that actually is really helpful with AI now. It's awesome because I'll like put it in. This is a perfect example. So I'll go through these exercises and you can do them in Cursor and I'll get what I think is all the fundamentals. Like, I know that this thing has to happen for it to talk to this thing. And now I'll just highlight it, drop it in chat, and I say, what did I get like syntactically wrong? And it's like, oh, well, you missed a comma. There has to be a comma, and there has to be like an extra space between the equal sign or whatever. And that stuff is really hard for me to grasp, I think, consistently. Like, even if you go back to Chinese, like, I am one of the more like comfortable probably people out there, like just getting dropped in the world and like navigating it and feeling very comfortable having, like, I can just have a conversation with somebody for hours. But man, like, you want me to write a book? Like, that's going to be really hard. Like, really, like, not going to happen. And so I feel like code is the same sort of thing.
And it's because, like, I love this insight. It's just basically there's little tiny things that you have to get perfectly right inside of code in order to make it work. But from what you just said, you are essentially you are coding it through this Exercism coding camp, and then you're having the AI check it now. So you have actually started to code yourself.
I do both. Like, and I don't know. So part of it is also just to deepen my understanding of the mechanics. And so, like, we can go here. So one of the language I'm learning is Elixir. And part of the reason for this is I have a theory that coding itself will change, and the structure of how we think about it, when it's only AI that's ever looking at it and ever writing it. So I actually vibe code, I give a Claude MD that says, here are my rules of how you actually need to write code, with the belief that no human will ever look at this, which takes some argument sometimes with these AIs. And I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that is, because there's sometimes you talk to an AI, it's like it should be really like verbose.
Yeah.
But then you're like, actually, you have context rot that you don't want it to be super verbose. You could just use a symbol. And so Elixir has this like, from what I am understanding, this functional programming that's also immutable. So one of the things that when I vibe coded is like, you'd pass this object over to something. And again, level of experience, I may be saying something wrong, but you'd pass something over and it would change. And you'd have these things that the AI just couldn't figure out what was broken. And so by using Elixir where I can, or I'm sure there's other ways to do this, but it just happened to be there. You're like, oh, actually you make these things like somewhat immutable and somewhat distinct. And so it's sort of clearer for the AI to route the path of where it's going, what's happening, and the context of it. And then I do some other things around that, like forcing things to be really small, actually these functions to be really small, so you can distinctly understand what's happening. And so then anyway, so the learning to code is like this loop of, I sort of fully expect to mostly vibe code everything, but I feel like the more I kind of learn the intricacies of a language or other languages, the more I can help the AI.
Oh yeah, I like that a lot. It would be very cool to have you come teach the AI whispers if you want. So I still don't understand the immutable part. What does the immutable part do for you?
Okay, so I've worked with Grok a lot to explain this and some others, just to make sure. So caveats out there.
Yeah.
My understanding is you have these two types of programming languages: object-oriented programming language and functional programming.
Oh, interesting.
And the idea with the object-oriented, using functional. So Elixir is a functional programming language.
Interesting.
And so most of what we use today is object-oriented, which you have the best. This is the example I got. So you have like a bowl, and you're trying to make a cake. And in object-oriented, you have this bowl, and you say, hey, put in the flour and like put in the eggs, and go hand it off to somebody else. And then someone else maybe puts in some milk or whatever, I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
And then you go pick it up, and you're like, whoa, what the hell? Why is there milk in here? Like, and it breaks your whole system. And in functional programming, you can't do that. It's not possible. You just say, you have hey, here's the flour and here's the eggs, and here you go. And it's always that. And if you ever do it, it's a new thing called mutable or other bowl. And so if a program is built to always grab the bowl, it will only ever grab the flour and eggs, or half-made bowl, maybe in this case. And it can only ever grab the one with milk if it's a new thing. And so it'll go grab this, and it will never sort of make that mistake. And so one of the things that happens in object-oriented is, again, according to Grok, like it's called spooky action at a distance, is your stuff will just change, and you can't really figure out where it changed.
Yeah.
You're like, where the hell did the milk come from? Why is it in here? And you're like chasing it, and you're figuring it out. And one that's obviously really hard for me, not being like a coder, but it's also apparently, for me, been hard for the AI to figure out where it's coming from. And they'll, I don't know.
Your theory is that basically functional programming solves this with Elixir. And are you aware of Urbit? Do you know about Urbit?
This is, what's the guy's name?
Curtis Yarvin.
He's really political now. Curtis Yarvin. Yeah. I have heard of it, but I don't know too much. Isn't it an OS rather than a programming language, or am I wrong there?
Well, no, it's an OS with its own programming language. So they built an entire. So I will do my best to explain that crazy project, because just like his controversial political views, his programming views are quite out there as well. But it attracted a lot of people, and including myself, for a really long time, because that was during like 2020 when I first heard about it, and my political understanding changed pretty drastically with COVID. And so what they built was a way to peer-to-peer operating system that had its own machine code to get rid of Unix, because they were trying to replace Unix the thesis of it is that Unix is this old thing that doesn't really work that well, and it's just sort of been patchworked together over a long period of time, which I think is right. I think that's accurate about how bad Unix is, and it's only meant for so then you have an operating system like Mac and like PC, but those operating systems weren't built to network. They were built for a personal computer, not a personal computer networked together, basically. And so they tried to build this giant distributed system with its own functional programming language called Hoon, and then they also built a machine language called Nock. So they built both new languages with it was a clean slate, totally new operating system, everything like that. But given the ambitiousness of this project, basically, and also crazy political stuff, which I've stopped paying attention to for about 6 months to a year, because AI came around and I was trying to understand this crazy Urbit thing. And the first thing I tried to do when I got ChatGPT was like, help me code in Hoon, and it couldn't do it, and it was stuck. I wonder if it could now. But in that point, like the whole point of Urbit was you get your own personal server. You get your own personal server that you can control and that you can communicate with other servers as a peer and say, oh, I don't like that server, I like this server. And so you get your own personal server, and then AI has now made it possible for me to get my own personal server. I'm looking at it right now. It's my Raspberry Pi. I've got my own server. So it basically made all of that go away. And for me personally, a lot of the people who are really into it are still chugging along with it, but they're not. Hoon is their functional programming language, and so that for some reason they decided to use a functional programming language. Now that you said this, I'm going to go study functional programming, because I've studied like the word of it, but I didn't know enough about computers until I started to vibe code, and now it feels like any technical concept is like within my grasp, which is a really cool feeling. Do you feel the same? Like, if you have anything to say about that functional stuff,
yeah. I'm curious to get your perspective on the servers and the mesh network, and just like, and maybe we don't need to go down this path, but what it means for like society and people as a whole. But I do also, to your point, agree, like the across the board on technology. Like we have a disposal in our sink and it broke, and like I figured out how to fix it by like taking pictures with Grok and saying like, what part should I take off now? And so everything from like software bits to actual atoms to, I haven't gone down the Raspberry Pi path like you have yet, but just the whole stack. If you, with AI and enough like persistence, you can get to something, I think.
It's so crazy. I got my. I'm not going to get it, but I just got some. I ordered something from China,
Nice.
And I got it to Argentina, and it's really funny because now Amazon has opened up shipments to Argentina, and it's cheaper than Mercado Libre. Not everything's available. That's how I got an SSD drive down here. So I've got something from the U.S. And then I was like, well, I need this other thing to go turn my Raspberry Pi into my own version of Alexa and just speak with my Raspberry Pi and integrate an agent in it, and then get my home automation, but with no big tech company in the loop. And so I had to go get this thing from China, and it took a month, and then showed up, and I paid $80 for it, but then it charged me $80 more in tariffs to go get it. And so I haven't even opened the box yet, but I think what I need to do, I'll need to attach it to either my ESP32 or my Raspberry Pi, which I'm sure I'll have to like buy tools and stuff like that. But that's the cool thing, as you said, you can just take pictures. I just went to the hardware store and I started taking pictures, and it told me like, what's the Spanish word for this thing that I need? So I think this will be a really good philosophical conversation about like, what does that do to society? Well, I think there's a certain amount of people who, like, all it takes is activation energy. Like, all it takes is the ability to be like curious about what this thing is and how to get it working. I have been really struggled isn't the right word, but it's been hard for me to understand, because we've been teaching this stuff with AI whisperers now for 2 years, and it's been hard for me to understand how little interest there is in terms of how technology really works now, particularly now with this little tool, this LLM tool that can answer all these questions about it, compared to the industry of technology. And like, there's an industry of technology, and there's all these people in technology who don't have any interest in technology but are doing it for a job. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense. Like, it's really crazy. The economy right now is really crazy because technology is the only source of optimism for jobs, basically. So it makes sense. And the craziest thing was I just there was a crypto conference, and I noticed the same thing about the crypto conference, that there were a bunch of people who hated their jobs, who had no idea what a blockchain was, and are in these like Ponzi economic things, basically. And so like that mixed with the fact that it's now possible to understand technology and there's a total lack of interest, that might just be time. I just might be more disposed to being on the cutting edge of stuff, and I think you are too. But what do you think this will do to society, given your experience?
So one of the things I think about, to your point, it's been interesting as I try and bring up AI to people and show them, hey, check out what I just did, or check out what you can do. And you'll like craft, I'm sure you're 10x better than me at this, but you'll like craft trying something you think will appeal to them. And one of the things I've actually been thinking about over the weekend is like, you get a response of like, oh, it did this one thing wrong. And my reaction is, yeah, you just prompt it again, and then you get it right. Like, it's just three more, 5 more steps. Like, it's not that far. How crazy is it? And so I do think it will take longer than like the hype people are saying. But the flip side is, I don't think it takes that many people to foundationally change society. Like before, there's a whole group of people like you and me that would like run a Raspberry Pi that now like enables a mesh network that enables something of communication outside the main channels. And wow, if you just go from like 3 people in a city that were actually interested in doing that to like 30 or 300, that's massive. Like that's completely game changing.
Yeah, it's like percentage wise, because the people who would do Raspberry Pi in 2020 or in 2015 would have needed extreme levels of autism to get into those little pathways, right? Like to get through those little kind of like, and that it's exactly right. It's like the amount of steps that you need to get through when something goes wrong. And autism, like real autism, really helps with that, which is just like they're so curious about these little pathways of technology that they're like so into it. And what LLMs have allowed us to do, which is like I don't want to speak for you in terms of my rankings on autism, but slightly autistic. Slightly autistic people can, or ADD. Maybe it's ADD. Maybe it's like because people with a foot in both worlds and who wouldn't go through the extra 25 steps to get a Raspberry Pi. But now that it's 2 or 3 steps, it's like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Like this is totally possible. And I like the percentages. I like what you said about percentages. It's like, okay, Buenos Aires is a city of 12 million people. Before you probably maybe had 20,000. And now there's like 100,000 people who are able to do it. And like that, those people basically have knowledge work superpowers now. Knowledge work superpowers are really interesting. But then there's the economic picture, which is really interesting because so many people, including the people who are building the technology, have so much pessimism about this technology and what it's going to do to society and economy. In some ways, I can see a lot of what they say is right. In other ways, it feels like COVID over again, but with a new characterization.
Yeah, I think so. There's these 2 books I have in mind lately when I think about technology. One is this. It's called Ettling Morrison, I think is his name. And it's called Man, Machines, and Modern Times. And then there's the social impact of the telephone. That's like a series of essays. And there's 2 stories I'll kind of bring out of this that I think are interesting. So in Man, Machine, and Modern Times, the core, I think, takeaway is you never know how technology is going to impact and change something. Like you hear these things like, oh, the people who created social media need to be responsible for the impact of social media. And one, they think that's bad, but they don't talk to like people in corrupt countries that are like actually upholding like corruption and stuff like that with social media and the benefits there. But two, like this other point is like you can't possibly know what the impact is. And so they have an example of like the scope on guns in Navy boats on the ship that like originally were useless because they would just like smack you in the face. And then as they figured out how to like have this suspension balance, it actually became useful as they would absorb like the movement of the gun. And so this was like, I don't know, 10, 20 years later. And it's the same thing. So there's this vignette in this social impact of the telephone that's really fascinating because the French, when they were introducing the telegram, they saw it as an ability of command and control. Like, hey, our job is to force and control the society. And now we can deliver our propaganda everywhere. We can just like submit it all, tell everyone what to do. And also micromanage armies, right? Like, hey, this army's on the front lines. And before they used to like YOLO and actually maybe win. And now we like have to, now the king can go and tell them what they should go do on the mountains. And those were all sort of true for a while. And now you look back and you're like, wow, the telephone was so massively actually distributed. And these individuals now could like talk peer to peer and completely changed. But the original vision was like a control mechanism.
You said telegram or telephone. So social impact of the telephone. So this was like in the early 1900s where the king was like, okay, well now I can go tell the foot soldiers exactly what to do. But the telephone itself ended up being a mesh network, a peer-to-peer mesh network. That's really interesting. Have you gotten into mesh networks yet? What are your thoughts on mesh networks if you know anything?
So I think they're fascinating. They've been one of those things that have like been in the back of my mind for a while. And, Jack Dorsey has his BitChat thing that he just released that I think is really interesting. I live in a place where like there's no one ever. If you open up a mesh network, like it's just too spread out, right? And so I've never actually seen the value. And I see the dilemma of it, which is like, how do you actually have a proper mesh network that allows for connections at some meaningful amount of distance, or you have to have hyperdensity, or like Buenos Aires, right? If you have enough,
hyperdensity or long range antennas. And so this is the thing that I got here, which I was really excited about, which is a long range antenna. And so this guy is the long range antenna, and without cities in the way. Or without big buildings in the way, it would take, I think it can go like 10 kilometers. It can probably go 2 or 3 kilometers, 1 to 2 miles, basically. And so I tapped into a mesh network through something called Meshtastic, which is an app that I downloaded on my phone that connects with this ESP32. And now I'm in chats with these people who are all over Buenos Aires, all the cypherpunks in Buenos Aires. And I love the fact that Buenos Aires has a lot of cypherpunks. And people are like sharing weather alerts and all these things. Yeah, and like if the power goes down, I will have this guy running, and I can communicate with. And apparently in Spain, this is how during this recent power outage in Spain, that was how a lot of people were collaborating, was through these mesh networks. But that is an interesting point. So it's like it was really interesting turning on the app because it just took a few minutes. I only had it, so mine is now a node. So this guy is now a node. So that means that other people with the same thing can then use mine to expand the signal. And so we're all connected in this mesh network. And so when I opened up the app, it took a few minutes. Like 1 or 2 things showed up, and then it took another like hour or day until I got access to the whole network. And I think that's on purpose. There's all these settings, I think, where you can like where you only show yourself to new nodes based on a certain time period of being active and stuff like that. But like that feels like, and I've had conversations with other people, that feels like it could lead to a new internet, which is like because right now it's just text. But going back to that Unix thing, that's what Unix is too, right? That's what it all is just text at a computer. Like, what's text that gets translated down to machine code into zeros and ones, right? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like programming languages and then like what you
And
built on top of the actual binary, and
yeah,
or what are you
and
thinking?
networking protocols too, right? Like networking is just
Mm-hmm.
sending
Mm-hmm.
text and packets. I don't even know what a packet is now, but
Mm-hmm.
now I'm interested to know what a packet is.
That's my understanding. Yeah, we're getting outside of my depth there too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just you bundle up text in some way and you send it across the network. And I think one of the interesting things about networking in general is I think it was built for really unstable sort of networking and
Yeah,
environments, because that's how
interesting.
it was originally. So I don't know exactly, but it feels like it might be conducive to mesh networks as well.
Oh, going back to the early bricks of the networking and everything like that.
Yeah,
Um,
potentially.
this is the craziest thing, and I know you're into history as well, and like this interplay between history and development and technology is really interesting. Something I think about all the time. Um, but then we got the future coming at light speed, and a lot of stuff is gonna. Are you excited about? What are you most excited about the future? Do you have any fear? What are you afraid of? So
So okay, so I tend to be pretty optimistic, but I do think like I, what I s- the way I think about it is AI might be one of the most disruptive things we've seen ever. But you only have two choices. You can get on board and like ride that wave and just be like, giddy up, let's go. Or you can just get smacked by it. And that's it. And if it's not that disruptive, great. Like, hopefully you got on the wave and you enjoyed it. And so for me, I am generally excited. Does that mean like that there might be change and stuff that happens? For sure. Uh, but I think a lot of the change in many ways can be better. And I think like one of the things people don't think about is how I guess how much potential there is for betterness in our society, both in terms of like I think if you look at the US, which is a lot of the tech centric conversations, one, it's a pretty great place in a lot of ways compared to like other countries, and you're like you're sort of spoiled because other countries could massively benefit from I talked to some guy in Africa that learned how to cut hair on YouTube, right? And we don't
wow,
just talk about this, but like this dude is making way more than he could have because he had
yeah,
a cell
no,
phone that let him watch YouTube to learn how to cut his hair. And just like we were talking about with AI and you can learn anything technical, that's true for so many other things. Like you want to teach yourself math. And so we talk about, oh, it's going to replace the teachers. And you're like, well, what about the person that doesn't have any teacher at all?
yeah,
So
interesting.
there's that
Centralization,
base to it. Yeah.
centralization,
Yeah.
centralization
Yeah. Yeah.
on
Yeah.
teachers, knowledge, centralization of knowledge.
Totally. Totally. And not only, yeah, to your point, like the sort of official narrative that happens when you have one tier of teachers or something like that you can get out of it. But yeah, just you don't have access to it. And then I do think there's leveling up. Like we've all heard these stories of someone who said, hey, I asked ChatGPT and it gave me 5 things to look at. And the doctor only wanted to test 3. And I demanded they did the 5. And of course it was like, 4th or 5th or whatever. And I think that's just true across the board in so many ways. So does that mean the way doctors work or teachers work is going to change? Like totally, but what would we rather have? Like a society that's moving and growing and adjusting, or a society that's just stagnant and flat and does nothing just so we can know that it's the exact same it's always been?
So I like this idea of centralization of knowledge inside of a teacher's. It reminds me of the fact that my sister is a communist and she's also a teacher, and she taught me everything I knew about politics when I was very younger. So I got a really interesting education, and she also did that to a bunch
Sounds
of
like it.
people in San Francisco. And then later on, I started. I always had. Once I was around 13 or 14, I started to have pretty strong disagreements with her. But like she's a teacher, and so she's teaching all these kids communism, and it's really interesting because I also recognize that all through the West there are the teachers unions, and the teachers unions, I'm sure there are a lot of good teachers inside of the teachers unions, but a lot of them are also like not really out for the benefit of the children, and sort of like there's just this intense centralization of knowledge, and teachers don't really get paid that much comparatively. Well, maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's just like the propaganda that the teachers talk about. But who knows? I have no idea. But like the centralization of the teacher as the prime. I think that's one of the reasons why some people aren't really excited about it because they expect a teacher to look like a human and to like be in front of you telling you what you need to do. And that's not what AI does. AI never tells you. It only accepts. It's only receptive. There's no like, unless you program the agent to talk first, and then but even then, it's like the person has to go and find that agent that talks first in order to receive the agent. And so I like this idea. It also reminds me of something I found out about Ethereum recently, which is that the centralization of Ethereum knowledge is actually centralized. So it's like that's one of the aspects. There's only a certain amount of people who actually know how to code or how Ethereum really works. Like that's actually only a really small amount of people. And so I like this idea of playing with the centralization of knowledge. And it is distributed. That is really interesting. LLMs are distributed knowledge. They're not a centralized knowledge, even though let's get into this because I'm sure you have some interesting ideas of this. It's the foundational labs are centralized. Then there's the open source, and you have access to sort of thought streams from China in terms of how they made their open source knowledge what's your thoughts on the future of open source versus the centralized, and if you want to talk about the distributed knowledge work that's made possible with LLMs too. Anything you want to talk about?
Yeah. So I think I think we're probably still underestimating the AIs that are coming out of China. Probably underestimating. Yeah, DeepSeek just released their V3.2 that is getting a lot of hype, but I expect that I'll put this out there, like in the next maybe 3, maybe 6 months, I think we'll see one of the Chinese AIs just kind of blow away all the Western AIs, and that'll cause a little bit of a freak out. And there are a number of reasons for it. So one, like China's a great place. Like it's doing a lot technologically. We see the videos, but like they're properly, very, very, smart people, a number of them that are all working hard and also just like having all the other sort of independent thinking in some ways of their own, right? So like DeepSeek is operating in a very different way from what GLM is doing, the other Chinese lab, and they're operating different than like Minimax and Kimi, right? The Kimi founder is famous for being like obsessed with music and like not Pearl Jam. I can't remember the band name now. But anyways, there's a couple bands he's really in. Oh, Pink Floyd. He's really into Pink Floyd. All their conference rooms are music, and you can kind of see that because it's actually really good at like writing and just like it sounds more natural. And it brings a different perspective. So anyways, point being, there's these different views that are coming. And they also have this, like, I'm sure if you pull up Google Analytics on some sites you probably have seen this like huge spike every once in a while. And if you isolate it, it's coming from China and Singapore. I at least see this on all the sites that I own and even companies I work with. It's just boom, boom, like 5,000 people a day, which is almost certainly bots. Which means they're ingesting data at a level that I think we aren't seeing in the West, at least, and whatever that means, we'll see. But you have them bringing in this data. You have sort of the they don't have to follow copyright, or at least they don't. What are you going to do if they took a book like Claude or Anthropic got in trouble for getting books? But what are you going to do if Kimi takes books? Like, too bad. And so I think you'll see it come out really good. And then we talked about they kind of have to be open source, because if you're not open source, you're not going to convince a US company to use it. But if you can say, as long as we're not sending our data back to China and we know it's not going back to China, why wouldn't we use this amazing AI that's free, that we host on our own servers, essentially free? It's open source, right? And we can even adjust it as we want. And so you have all these things that are moving in this direction. I think it will be very fascinating to watch, because of course eventually they want to start charging, and I don't know how they're going to figure out how to start making more money. You have some Claude Code competitors. Minimax has their own version. I think Kimi has their own version. Gwen has their own version. So a lot of the AI labs are trying to compete with Claude Code, and I think they're seeing some adoption there. And so they will want to make money, but right now their job, like we talked about, is and maybe it's in robotics or maybe it's somewhere else, they're actually going to make their money. They're just going to say, hey, well, we need this intelligence to go into hardware, and so if we can make the best of intelligence, you're now just going to go pay for your robots from us, which we've seen Unitree and some of these other companies out there. And so I think it will be really fascinating, because what does that mean for everything in the West? Like, what does it mean for our energy investments? What does it mean for Grok and ChatGPT and Gemini. And I do think they have unique positions that are, Chinese labs will have a hard time maybe competing with. Like, how easy is it going to be to like take Kimi and put it in your Gmail? Probably not as easy as it will be to get Gemini 3 if Google figures out how to do that. Like they haven't yet, but
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we'll continue to be impressed with what's coming out of China. Yeah, where do you want to go with that? We can go wherever.
So I got a lot of follow-up questions there. The open weights versus open source. So somebody recently pushed back on the fact that Chinese models are open source. They said they're not really open source, they're open weights because we don't know what went into the training data. We don't know some various other things. I'm not sure if that's true. That was just some random thing. So there's like that question of like, do we actually know how important are the things outside of weights? I think you're right in the sense that a US company would be totally fine with using open weight as long as they can see how it goes into that proprietary model. I was actually doing a crazy, I got this great flow, which I think you might like too, which is that, so I can't read the deep research. So I get the deep research, I do the deep research queries on all the different ones that I pay for. And then I don't have the actual attention span to go actually read them because I'm on the internet, connected to the internet through the day. And it's just like a constant distraction machine. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just send them to my Kindle, and I always when I go to sleep, I just like have no internet, and then so I'm just reading. I read 2 hours before I go to sleep, and in those 2 hours, I've started to read the deep researches that I've been going throughout the day. It's really I really like this way because as I know you're a reader as well. You gave me some really good book suggestions, and it's like I love human written word, but the ability to be really specific with what type of information you're wanting. So all that is to say is that I was reading about the data sovereignty. There's all these models of data sovereignty that people are thinking about, and I went actually deep in the United States. We actually don't think of data as property because of the First Amendment. We don't think of data as property because it gets in the way of free speech. If you treat data as property, there's all these sort of implications as it comes to free speech. And so the way it's worked out sort of organically, emergently, is that we just have these contracts. It's all in contract law. And so we have these contracts, which we go on Facebook. We say nobody reads it because how could you read that? And you say, click terms of service. Okay, fine. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. And so we just basically, due to this crazy thing in the United States legal system where it's just like we've been giving up the data. So Facebook has a lot of data. I really liked your point about China has all these bots that are going after it, and then they have the copyright. They don't have to worry about copyright. And so they're just creating these giant data sets that are essentially going to be really useful for them. And it gets back to this. It's been so interesting I'm sure you were reading all about AI before 2022. If you had used GPT-2, we can talk about that. But there's like this giant wave of fear and anxiety over what AI would look like in this sort of Terminator, and that could happen in the future. But then it came out, and it was just like this really helpful bot that like helps you learn about technology. It's like the Matrix Kung Fu move, like I know Kung Fu moment. But the only trick is that it's just like it's all the normal ways that we've ever learned stuff. It's just the ability to learn stuff is now like you can download it in your head. You just have to read it. Like that's the but that's it's always been that way, right? What do you think?
So I have a deep belief here that's only grown stronger over time. I think historically, for whatever reason, maybe it's our generation, you get told this idea of like you must trust this other to have control over any sort of power. And I think as I've grown and seen how technology flows, the clearest way, and I would actually go really far here in a way that maybe people aren't totally comfortable with, but like, I think that you take any technology and actually the best thing you can do for safety is you shove it down to people and you give as many people as possible access to it. Because like you hear like, oh, hey, AI could break into a bank. And you're like, yeah, but what if that bank has an AI that stops the AI that breaks into a bank?
Yeah.
Right? And it's only a problem if you don't have that other side. And so this whole like, oh, we need to only have like the government to have it or the corporations to have it. I actually think this is like such a kind service of the Chinese LLMs actually in some way, because you're breaking this monopoly that all these other big people have, that you can say, you know what, you can't raise price on me, because if you try to sort of like, extort my value that I'm getting from you, I'm going to switch over to any of the other AIs that are doing a really good job. Even if they're not better, they're on par. So it's competition in the purest sense, but it also is driving this power, and it's a check on power to give people access. So I think like, everything from we've talking about, from the mesh networks to all of this, the way it goes bad is you say, you know what, only a few special people can have access to this really powerful technology.
Great points. I love it. And I think we were talking about Firebrand. I can never pronounce his name. So that guy, it was so funny reading him and then coming back to Argentina, because I've read a lot of the influences that Javier Milei has had, and Javier Milei is a self-styled anarcho-capitalist, but tricky part is that he's an anarcho-capitalist who now has political power, and is allied with the U.S. and Israel in these very interesting ways, which have changed while I've been here in more interesting ways. And so he's an anarcho-capitalist, and so I've read a lot of the sort of philosophy and theory, and Firebrand was an anarcho-scientist. So it's the same thing on science. They both believed in the same thing, which is the state should have no role whatsoever in science. And Firebrand was right. Firebrand was totally right about everything in the past 30 years. And I really like what you just said, because China now offers that to us. They're offering us anarcho-capitalism as long as the U.S. stays in the game. I think if China completely dominates, then I think it's actually fucked. Because I don't think they would be any. It's just like an incentive, right? And the U.S. did it in the 90s. We kind of did that thing. Like we had the full power, and we totally used it in ways that made a lot of enemies, and now we're just making a lot more enemies. But what do you think of that?
Totally, 100% agree. And I actually like. I think that's true of any single power, and I wish like Japan would step up their game, and like India and all these other countries. Like you should. I don't know what it takes at the level of why we haven't seen, a Japanese Quen or DeepSeek. But like, please give me your perspective. Like it's 100% on board of that. And then you have that competition. Yeah. So if any country has this dominant control, or even any set of small companies, I think you have these issues. And so the more that we go on the other side, sort of that, I think where we riffed on Firebrand was this, Giordano Bruno, and he makes this point of like the science's obligation is actually to look at this thing that doesn't have the ability to use like scientific words, and actually sort of I can't remember exact words, but sort of accept it as real and bring it into the science and use our principles of like proving it. And if we can't do it, then that sort of we can push it away, but we have to we can't reject it out of hand. We have to bring it into our process and follow it. Yeah. And I think sort of in that way, you want all these other people to bring their own perspective. You want these heretics. You want these Gnostics. Like you want all of these of the LLMs being brought where you're like, wow. And I think this is one of the things about DeepSeek that's interesting, is because they're the most obviously uniquely approaching their development different from everybody else, I think, in terms of like, hey, we're going to do the OCR. I think they're very constrained in what they're actually able to do. I think they're bringing a financial mindset. And so they are, if you look at what they're doing, so this is my thesis on what they're doing. This is not necessarily deeply informed. They came out with 3. It was really incredible. And now they're taking all these micro pieces and they're trying to solve the micro pieces. So everyone's like, well, where's R2? Where's like Ford, V4? While everyone else has been shipping, they're shipping these things that are like, hey, we figured out that you can actually handle like 10x more context if you flip it over to an image and then read the image. You're like, oh shit. Like, and you look at that in isolation, you're like, oh, that's interesting. Cool. Like there's better OCR out there. But you look at it as like, hey, is this a foundational research piece that they're building towards? And you're like, oh, did they just like figure out how to 10x their context over every other LLM out there? And what does that mean for training data? Or what does that mean for how they're approaching things? And so my understanding of like V3, their math proof too. I think Grok is also thinking about this way, and XAI, but their prover, their whatever math prover that they came out with like a week ago, they said, well, what if we use, instead of rewarding the right answer, because that's not useful. Like, it's in the training data, we can prove that it got the answer. What if we build a mechanism to inspect the logic and the thinking, which is like genius and also obvious, right? Like, of course,
What's that called?
the methods to getting the right answer is better. It's their math prover. They're using it to develop math proofs. And again, you can look at it and you're like, oh, cool. You have this really niche hobby of thinking about math. But if you're like, wait, you just figured out a way to inspect the logic and thinking of your AI and actually have coherent cohesion on in fiction world, they call it, what is it, like logical consistency. Yeah. And so if you can at least be logically consistent within your own chain of thought, now you're going to come up with better ideas. And I think Grok, they talk about this in a search of truth and trying to make sure they have truth. And I think those are probably the only two that are thinking about how do we like ground this process in a sort of reflective result.
That gets to Provenance. One of my favorite people that I've interviewed twice now, Jessica Talisman. She's a knowledge management. I think she calls herself an information architect, but she just really knows knowledge management and information architect. And she taught me all about ontologies, and ontologies are what Palantir uses to go map out all these different things. And we were having a conversation about provenance, because Western civilization has this wonderful knowledge work thing that we did where we had institutions that were sort of enlightened that allowed us to like actually search for truth and like follow the source of the chain of knowledge all the way back to the beginner, basically. And then my homeland of Silicon Valley is like, oh, we don't need that. Let's just break that apart. We don't need it, blah, blah, blah. Amazon actually uses ontologies because when you have these giant scale, you need the machine needs to be able to navigate it in ways that humans don't really think about. Like, ontologies were developed by philosophers, but there's also really important for machines. Machines need these ontologies as well. And so with like a giant catalog like Amazon, they need ontologies to basically serve up all of these different e-commerce products and like map them out, not for the humans to know, but for the machines to know. And so the AI needs them as well. But this idea of provenance, and actually gets to the last 10 minutes that I want to talk about, is the science, which is like, so provenance, we need to track something all the way back to its source so that we can understand, is it true? Who does it come from? All these different things, all these things that Western civilization figured out about epistemology, the libraries do this. And so all the people in Silicon Valley are like, oh no, we don't need that, blah, blah, blah. We're gonna move fast, we're gonna just make money, make a lot of money, just gonna make my $100 million and then buy the house, and then everybody will be really nice to me and want to be my friend and everything like that. And like, that's their whole world. It's totally like outside of like any sort of like, actually from the book that you gave me, it's like the corporation used to serve as a national, like, and you served the nation by getting the charter for the corporation. That's like totally gone. Fiduciary duty only means stockholder duty. So provenance, LLMs, now we got the hallucinations coming in, and the hallucinations make what I just said much harder, because now they're actually putting fake knowledge into the machine and then retraining on that. I don't think any of the labs have any solutions. Maybe you know something about the Chinese, the way they're doing it. Maybe Grok and DeepSeek have good ways of trying that, but that doesn't stop all the other ones from totally poisoning the internet. So there's that sort of epistemology and provenance sort of layer that we can talk about. And then the other thing that would be fun is about science. Recently, the 17 national laboratories were just given access to all their data. All their confidential data are now going to be shared with OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google in order to try to do science, and actually closed loop science. So like no human in the loop, which I think is a really bad idea unless they have some really crazy technology that they haven't told us about yet, which might also be the case, right? Like going back to that firebrand, it's like, it might be true that like U.S. government has crazy technology that's way better than anyone else, like, and they just haven't shared it because it's just so much like it's beneficial to be secret, and then that we could bring back to China. I just threw a lot at you, but like, what of those things are you most interested in talking about?
Yeah, we could talk about Lockheed Martin and some skunk works and UFOs and stuff too. But before we go there, or maybe we don't go there, I think what ties this all together is a dilemma I think about. I don't know how to solve it, but I think DeepSeek and Grok are thinking about the problem in the right way that we described, which is how do you allow for and actually encourage, Move 37 that AlphaGo had, if you're familiar with this. So what happened, right, when DeepSeek was playing Go against Lee et al., they were, it was going well, and Lee et al. Probably looked like he was going to win. And AlphaGo made this move that, if I recall, maybe I'm wrong, from what I recall, everyone kind of laughed at, even like, what is this? No human would ever make this move. And Lee et al. Was like, uh-oh, I don't know what to do. And it totally changed the game. AlphaGo won, and it was like very clearly, basically this move that no human would ever make because they had played it for so long and clearly won the game. And how do you allow for that if we then talk about hallucinations as actually being a bad thing? Which I get why we see them as a bad thing.
Interesting.
But right now we're saying, does the centralized knowledge base that we have confirmation of, COVID or whatever, is this the right label to have? Did it output the thing that the humans agree with? And if you have that, you can never have a Rule 37. And if we never have a Rule 37, like, we are capped in what AI can do. And I think this is a very foundational dilemma, because obviously you don't want them to say, oh yeah, like right now the president of the United States is like, I don't know, Kim Kardashian. And you're like, oh, that's obviously wrong. Why did you say that? So you need to balance both. But
how do you limit the downside of false knowledge entering into the internet, and at the same time allow for these things? And the Move 37 thing, that's new to me. I'd known about Move 37, but I had not known that it's hallucinations which allowed for Move 37. But that also reminded me that the supercomputers are very much like those 17 national laboratories have giant supercomputers. And so it actually makes sense that they actually probably do have advanced technology, like, because AlphaGo was the Deep Blue was in 1997. AlphaGo was in probably early 2000s. So they probably do they probably have crazy technology, right? They probably have crazy supercomputers that can actually do closed loop science. That's a really good question to investigate. Well, how do you investigate it? Yeah.
Well, we've seen some of this. And so to be clear, there is a difference between LLMs and the type of AI that did AlphaGo. So one of the things with AlphaGo is you have this closed loop. So you can play, AlphaGo played 10 billion games or something, and it actually figured out it wasn't even a hallucination. It knew that this move was the right move. It didn't know it was wrong. And you can do this because you have this reward mechanism. Hey, you won the game. You won the game. It knows, okay, I win the game. But how do you win a conversation? And that's what we don't know. So how do you get better at conversations? And that's why I think Grok and DeepSeek are on the right path, because they're saying, well, the ultimate truth, the first principles, or at least the logical coherence, these two things are how you win, right? It doesn't matter if you say something crazy or something normal or something fun or something boring. Go back to the truth. Go back to the core elements. And that's hard to define. But I think that's way better than go to the authority. If you said what the authority thinks, here's your candy.
Yeah. Oh man, that's like the dystopian AI. Is like, that's right. And that's definitely what the last admin wants. Probably what the current admin wants too, as well, because that's what power wants, right? The power wants to be the authority. And this is the sort of the decentralized kind of thing. So last few minutes, what is the decent, and if you have to go, let me know. What is the decentralization versus centralization? What do you think centralization and decentralization are? Do you think that the decentralization is Somalia, or is it the city states, or is it sort of European Holy Roman city states, or the Greek city states, or what do you think it is? And do you have an ideological attachment to centralization or decentralization?
Yeah, I think we're opening up. I can go longer if it's interesting, but I think one of the things that I think has happened historically, and I think that we need to talk about things in terms of how you're pulling things rather than extremes. And so, what is the state of the world, and are you getting more centralized or more decentralized?
Yeah.
And one of the theories I had before was, hey, we're going to have a lot more of these like sovereign individuals.
Yeah.
And what I've shifted is, wow, how can we have a sovereign individual if we don't yet have sovereign countries? And so I think that's actually a step we'll first see, that we actually saw pop up during COVID a little bit, because we didn't realize, hey, like most of the countries in the world outsource their FDA to Europe or America. And then you're like, wait, should we actually just let the FDA decide what like Argentina, what drugs can be approved there?
Whoa.
And so now with LLMs and with some of these things, you can say, actually, I think even as a small country, we have the ability to think from first principles about what medicine our citizens should be able to take. And actually, we probably have a long history of like the value of maybe mate to your health, or other, indigenous medicines or herbs. And we should, same with LLMs, and why isn't there a Japanese LLM? Like, you should have, I would love if Argentina had this huge, robust like biotech industry that was building on their old knowledge of centuries, that was bringing these into the world. And that's true for biotech or anything. And so I think my running hypothesis is the big change that I think we see right now is a move towards sovereign countries, which I know sounds crazy because we've always thought of countries as sovereign. But I think that's just totally not true.
Yeah, it's almost like 1940s. Well, yeah, no. So the most of the countries were colonized in the 1800s, and then they were colonized by competing European powers, and then that sort of like blew up in World War II, and a lot of people declared independence. But then a new form of sovereignty kind of was changed, because all of a sudden you had the U.S. and the Soviet Union in a sort of a great power struggle, which kind of, there was a non-aligned third world. So those non-aligned third world, but they were like playing proxy games. So it wasn't really like totally non-aligned. It was like a lot of influence, global influence for both the Soviet Union and the United States. And then the 90s is like, okay, well, now it's over. U.S. is in control. Yeah, we're not going to go and colonize countries, but in terms of influence, it's like the FDA now makes all your decisions. I wonder how much of that was like a strong arming thing versus just like oh, well, we don't have the capacity as this country to determine those things, so might as well just like go with what the U.S. thinks, right? Because the U.S. was sort of an enlightened power in the 90s kind of type of thing. What do you think?
I think it was totally both. And I think where you maybe even saw the power struggle was not convincing you to outsource your FDA, because I think that maybe wasn't hard originally. Hey, look, we know we're doing really good. Look at the technology that's coming out of the West. Oh yeah, that makes sense. The US and Europe. And then I think where you saw the power struggle was like, no, but you should listen to the European, drug agency. I don't know what it's called, or you should listen to the US one. And there was a debate over which main country got the power of the outsourcing. But the outsourcing was sort of de facto agreed upon, because it'd be so expensive and it's so hard. And, why are we thinking about science today when we're just trying to like get food on our table and stuff?
And that brings to mind what an Argentine recently told me about the specific way the vaccine situation happened here in Argentina, which is that there was actually not so much of the mRNA, but there was a huge amount of Chinese and Russian and Indian vaccines. And so China and Russia and all these guys, they actually have their own vaccine. That's probably a good kind of sovereign, interesting, in your sovereign individual versus your sovereign country theory. This idea of a wet lab at the country level is really interesting. Like what I just said about Russia and China, every country now being able to build their own biologics, because it's like, I'm not going to have my own biology wet lab in my garage like a Silicon Valley startup that for at least 20 years, right? Like maybe in 20 years, I'll have that wet lab for myself and can kind of do all these crazy things, which are going to be philosophically interesting to talk about. But the countries, they're probably going to get that much sooner. And so it's like a breakdown. It's like a breakdown of the entire world order without the U.S. having as dominant. But I don't think we're going to go to war. I'd be willing to bet that there's probably going to be no global war like World War II or World War I. But it feels like relatively there's going to just be a breakdown in terms of the U.S. ability to do what it's been doing for the past 20 years. And I don't think China is either ideologically attracted to the idea of global domination, and I don't think they could, even if they were, because I think the same sort of deterioration in their ability to project power is going to happen as well. What do you think?
Yeah. So maybe one of my, other controversial views. I actually think that if you look at, the base mindset of Chinese people and Americans, they're far more similar than many other countries on earth. And I haven't, met Argentinians and stuff like that, but they're both very like pragmatic, and they're very like, hey, we can do better. We're building from the ground up. Yeah. They're very like, whatever works, like, let's get along. And so I actually I can vision a world where core deep allies are America and China. And I think it's getting talked about more, but like Europe has been very adversarial to America. Past 10 years, just total economic warfare. Yeah. And we're like, but they're our buddies. And you're like, really? And, but part of that trend, and I don't know if you recall this, but in the previous admin, there was so many calls of what I saw as propaganda that was like, war with China in 2026. It'll be China's fault. Like, trust us. But we got to be ready to go to war. And that scares me because I don't think, like, left to their own devices, I don't think America and China would try to go to war. Like, again, for everything I talked about, and I think there is benefit, and like, we're happy to have Chinese LLMs. They're happy to have US and learning. And we have normal, like, problems of, hey, we want to be we want our way and we want our way, and we'll kind of figure it out. But I think these are figured out in normal, like, cooperative ways, the same way we would figure it out with Europe. But there are warmongers that I think would really they see that as this opportunity to force. And I do give a lot of credit that that's sort of disappeared in the past year. It might bubble up again, but it does seem like we've stepped away from that being a possibility for at least a few years. Well, we'll see.
Yeah, so the because what you just said, I do buy the sort of theory that it's like the war machine keeps on making money, and that's been going on since the early 1900s. I think that probably feels like it's probably around the early 1900s that's where the war machine really started to get going and starting to make a lot of money for bankers and for nation states and for people in charge of nation states, and so that feels like it's sort of died now with Ukraine, right? Because Ukraine, it's like a stalemate, and it seems like the political will that they were able to manage has been broken by COVID, right? Because populations are just now like, no, we don't want any more war. It's like, what is the point of any of these wars? It's like not. I mean, World War II was a pointless war, or World War I was a pointless war too. But yeah, it's a. Do you think that that's right? Do you think they've just basically been sort of like that they've lost their ability to wage war for monetary gain? No, well, I mean, in Israel, there's still a lot going on in Israel. Yeah,
I think that's like I think that's the current view, and that's my hope. That's like the better path. But I don't I don't discount the ability to sort of persuade and get people on board with illogical wars still. Like India and Pakistan had a little bit of a scuff, which not to say that was illogical, but like there are these little like tiffs that we probably will see more of on a small level of countries figuring out neighboring, like, hey, you know what, I actually, if Argentina have Brazil have their own FDAs, like there's probably maybe a little bit of a argument over conflict, what the other smaller countries have. And I just hope that doesn't get flipped over into, well, now we need to go get really involved. And I think the citizens don't want it, but sometimes we don't necessarily have as much say as we want to have.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. How can people find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, best is to go to artisangrowthstrategies.com or Artisan Growth on Twitter or X. And those are probably the two best ways. Everything else links to all the other paths.